welcome aboard the Silverwind. My name is Captain Tom, and we are joined by my co-host and friend, intergalactic robot Wilson, and we are going to be going to a new place today, and we're not going to Saturn this time, so we can actually use the warp drive, which Wilson has been hard at work all week making sure that thing is tip-top and in good condition, and yeah, he wasn't able to put enough time to the AC, and I call it an AC. I don't know, the thing that regulates temperature in the room. So it's a little warm today, but we will make it through. So anyways, welcome everybody. We got Julian, we got Lionel, we got Just Some Guy. Yeah, welcome everybody. So yeah, this will be really exciting. Genesis chapter 16 is what we'll be covering today. So let's go ahead. Before we do any of that, we're going to go to the new place we're going to go to, which is called Io. And so we're going to go to Jupiter. We've gone to Jupiter before. And yeah, so we'll probably stay around there a little bit longer this time. So let's go ahead, make sure we could jump over there. I'll turn that down. Let's see. I want to make sure we don't overshoot it. All right, Wilson, try not to run into anything. All right, you guys ready for this? Let's see. I think that'll do it. All right. Let's read this. Howdy, let's go, Wilson, my Christian robot brother. Indeed. Okay, yeah, well, we are off. And while we go over here, just so you know, we're going to be covering some more facts that come straight from NASA. NASA is able to send several spacecraft as far into space as Saturn and Jupiter, to where these things can actually, you know, use scientific instruments to collect data from these celestial bodies, these worlds, if you will, which is pretty amazing stuff. Let's see here. Here we go. All right, Wilson, are we coming in? We're coming in hot. Okay, there we go. Well, at least we didn't run into anything. I'm pretty sure this will make sure we stay in place here. Easy day. Okay, so yeah, let's talk a little bit about Io. So basically what I was saying is that we send these spacecraft out here, like the Cassian spacecraft and things like that, and we can get like really close-up information on these things, which is a real testament to humanity and what we're able to accomplish, in my opinion. Let's see here. Make sure our instruments are good here. There we go. And well, what? Well, why are you looking at me like that? Well, it's a big deal for us to get all the way out here. I mean, yeah, you guys have figured this out a little bit sooner than we did, but yeah, I'd say all in all, human beings are pretty smart. So, did you put something on the screen? What is this? Were you reading the news of the day or something? Deceased New Jersey Congressman wins. Oh, really? Really, Wilson? Is that some kind of dig on the intellect of humanity? Okay, Wilson, how about this? Yeah, yes, sometimes people turn their brains off, and you know what, Wilson? You know what this really is? This isn't people not thinking. This is people not thinking critically. Were they only thinking of one thing? In this case, yeah, that's people wanting to basically vote for their, you know, political sports teams. So that's what you're like. I'm going to get rid of this. This is ridiculous. Here we go. How about that? Nice. I want the far screen. I just don't want your stuff on there. There we go. Okay, well, let's go ahead and talk about this moon. And speaking of critical thinking, let's talk a little bit about what we figured out about this moon, what makes it really interesting, and exactly, yeah, we'll talk about some of the stuff that might make it a little bit controversial. So with that, yeah, let's talk about it. So Io is a volcanic world. It's literally the Mustafar of our solar system. This is an entire world. It's a moon, but it's an entire little world that revolves around Jupiter that is under constant volcanic eruption. It is just the entire surface of it. A lot more is happening around its equator, but there is a lot of volcanic activity. And addition to that, it's actually, there's some fancy stuff going on with the magnetic belt around Jupiter. See, it gets really close to Jupiter. It has this very elliptical orbit, and what that means is that you have Jupiter in one spot here, and then Io will be way out here, and it'll come really close to Jupiter and swing right back out. That causes a lot of friction. It actually causes the entire moon to expand and contract around 330 feet from what they can observe, which means there's a lot of Yeah, a lot of friction going on creates a lot of heat. And so this would be a good example of the tidal friction that has been referred to before, and how some of these planets might still have an active core. So the core of this, they figured out, was almost pure iron, right? Or different types of iron. So you have these iron elements basically pushing and pulling against one another, creates a magnetic field around it. So there's active lightning all around this world right here. So it's literally a landscape of lava lakes, volcanic activity, and lightning streaking across the sky. So yeah, pretty crazy stuff. And the best visual, I would say, is something like Mustafar. Here we go, Pete Johnson here with the young ones. Very nice, very nice. So yeah, so we're just talking about Io here, and a couple things about this that is also really interesting. So it is said that this has to be 4.5 billion years. That's the main consensus going on with, the modern science and that sort of thing, which is a materialist point of view, which dictates these things have to be old, right? And so the idea is that, or one of the things they've come about with this is the volcanic eruption, in order for it to be 4.5 billion years old, just say it has around this much volcanic activity all of those years, the entire volume of this world would have erupted at least 140 times, right? And in the past, you would assume there would be more volcanic activity because when it first was formed, there should be some primordial heat, not just the heat that's happening from the friction here, which means it could be even more than that. So the entire volume of this thing supposedly has erupted 140 times, which is plausible, right? I mean, that's kind of just an interesting fact. But when you look at this right here, you notice something. It's a varying degree. There's a lot of different colors going on here. And some of that is because there are lava lakes, and of course that looks different. But there's a lot of different mixture of basically materials on the surface here that's erupting out. And that's one of the things they were able to observe with these spacecrafts that got near here, is be able to see that like there's a big mixture of different elements that are erupting to the surface. Now, if you think about it, if it's erupted this many times, if it's basically reformed itself over 140 times, during that time, most of the solid materials, or the more dense materials, would have gone towards the lower crust or closer to that iron core, where all the lighter materials would have eventually kind of settled towards the top. This is kind of the opposite of the issue that's going on with Jupiter. So with Jupiter, we have this big gas giant. This big gas giant has these, different layers. You could see right here, these different colors of gases that are going across. And that's because they are different gases entirely. And so they're actually flowing in streams around Jupiter in opposite directions. It's wild when you really think about that, but there are these different bands of different gases that have not fully mixed yet, flowing against one another. And apparently that's also been going on for 4.5 billion years, which is kind of hard to believe because you can tell that they're mixing and it hasn't fully saturated in 4.5 billion years. Pretty big mystery for scientists. Well, this is a big mystery as well, because if it's erupted itself out 140 times, the more dense material should be towards the core, lighter material should have separated, so most of the volcanic activity should be that outer crust erupting, which should be just lighter materials, and it shouldn't look this varying in its appearance. So that is a big mystery. Now, of course, if you're looking from a theistic point of view, since we're reading the Bible and we're talking about a perspective that is says that there is more to reality than just matter, that there's something that created that matter or sparked that matter into existence, and basically could have made this a few thousand years ago, and it looks that way because it hasn't erupted itself out over 140 times. So yeah, anyways, it always seems to be a much easier explanation from the theistic point of view. There's a lot of mysteries and a lot of faith-based arguments if you go through with the materialist point of view. So anyways, just thought I'd share that. That will be our background for the story today, which will be Genesis chapter 16. So if you got a Bible, you can more than welcome to follow along. And I think we're going to go to the reading room right now. So I'll see you guys over there. All right, we got the ship turned around in the reading room. So let's dive right into this. So basically what we've been talking about has been following Abram and Sarai mostly, and we've come to a point where in one part of the story there is a little bit of for the most part, Abram's been an incredible person who has been very faithful to God. We had one kind of like lapse in faith early on in the story when they went into Egypt, but besides that, he became a hero by defeating a big army that had ravaged the world. He did it in order to save his nephew Lot, and just overall, he's been doing pretty well for himself. And so with what we're going to be talking about today is a little bit of drama within the household. And so we're going to have to revisit that story a little bit from when he went into Egypt. But before we do any of that, I might as well just get the story out and start reading here. I don't think we have anything else we need to go over before we do that. All right, I think we should be good. So we're just going to read the first 2 verses right now, and then we'll break it down. So with that, we'll go ahead and enjoy the view. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had not been able to bear children for him, but she had an Egyptian servant named Hagar. So Sarai said to Abram, "The Lord has prevented me from having children. Go and sleep with my servant. Perhaps I can have children through her." And Abram agreed with Sarai's proposal. All right, so we're going to start there. So we're going to be talking about a little bit of family drama today. And first things first on that, and I got my notes right here. I should probably have those things opened up beforehand. But all right, so basically 10 years have passed since God has promised Abram that he's going to give him many descendants. So with that said, God has promised something, and the fruition of that promise hasn't really come through yet. And so, being very human, we see both Abram and Sarai are probably, kind of concerned about, hey, when is this going to happen? We're only getting older, like God's promised this thing, but are we supposed to do something? This moment that Sarai is at, she is, it's generally seen as a great shame if a woman is not able to, not able to have any kids. And especially back then, and that sentiment is still felt today. So she's not saying this from a place of, oh, you know what, I've got this clever idea, this is going to be really, really great. She's coming from a place of feeling really down about herself, probably feeling really worthless, probably not in a good place emotionally. And so she proposes this idea to Abram, and I believe we already covered it at the end of that verse, where Abram agreed with Sarah's proposal. It's like he's once again, speaking of humans not thinking, he seems to only be thinking about that desire to have kids and not really thinking about anything else, because any kind of critical thought probably would have let Abram know that, hey, your wife's at a low moment right here. You should probably be encouraging her and not agreeing to something that is definitely not, God didn't tell him to do this. Abram has been he's basically a prophet because he speaks directly with God, or God will speak directly to him through dreams and visions, and God audibly lets him know what God's plan is for him, and this wasn't part of the plan. So we will I think that's a big part of that right there. Okay, Hagar, let's talk about Hagar a little bit. So Hagar is she's an Egyptian servant. She's like handmaiden to Sarai. And the place where they would have picked up Hagar at, they actually got several male and female servants when he went over to Egypt. And if you remember that story, Abram decided to take matters into his own hands and not have faith in God. And so basically, relying on his own cleverness, he decided that he was going to pretend like he wasn't married to Sarai because she was beautiful, and figured someone would want to marry her, and that they would end up trying to take his life. So he basically is accepting all these gifts, like saying, I'm just her brother, when that's a lie, because he's more than that. He is actually, married to her. And so some of the gifts that he got from lying was male and female servants for his household. which is where Hagar would have came from. Now, Hagar and Sarai probably had a pretty good relationship. This would have been her top handmaiden, the one that was really close to her, maybe like her confidant, someone who was there with her every single day, and they experienced life together. And so Sarai is in this low emotional point, and she's saying, you know what, maybe, like, I still believe that, Abram, God is going to give you many descendants, but God has prevented me from having children. So she's pointing to God and basically kind of blaming him in this self-pitying kind of way, like, hey, he's the one preventing me from having kids. Maybe God doesn't intend for these descendants to come from me. And you can really kind of hear it in that kind of breakdown that's not coming from a good place. So anyways, she's offering Hagar. Now, this may seem a bit jarring, right? In modern standards, this would, be inconceivable, like that someone would do this. But this was the way surrogate parenthood happened back in the day. And so it was actually not that uncommon of an experience that if there was a household where a woman is unable to have kids, that she would offer a servant that was under her to have a kid in her place. And that kid would be considered, in this situation, Sarai and Abram's kid, even though Hagar is the actual birth mother. So this was kind of relying on worldly practices and a worldly standard, try and like bring along God's promise that Abram would have many descendants, which God reconfirmed in the chapter just before this. God made a covenant with Abram. God did all the work in that covenant. And then once again, God is the one who should be doing all the work to bring about this, and yet they're trying to jump in and speed it along. So let's see how well this works out for them, because just because the Bible describes people that God has chosen, or within God's people, them doing something a certain way, doesn't necessarily mean the Bible is condoning the behavior. So let's check out this next part here and see what happens. All right, 3 and 4. So Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, the Egyptian servant, and gave her to Abram as a wife. This happened 10 years after Abram had settled in the land of Canaan. So Abram had relations with Hagar, and she became pregnant. But when Hagar knew she was pregnant, she began to treat her mistress Sarai with contempt. All right, like I said, here comes the drama. So the deed is done. Hagar becomes pregnant. And with that, Hagar then starts to kind of look down on Sarai and starts to treat Sarai with contempt, as it says there. And so this is not a good situation whatsoever. Basically, she was able to get pregnant right away, so clearly it wasn't Abram's doing or anything like that. It was Sarai, and so this really just twists the knife that Sarai is going through right now. This emotional state is only being made worse by this whole situation going down like this, even though it was her idea. It's one of those situations where she's kind of getting exactly what she asked for in this situation, but it really wasn't what she needed. She was in a moment of weakness, proposed this idea, and Abram didn't even hesitate. He was just focused on the prospect of having his own children, that he just wasn't even focused on his wife or critically thinking it out. So let's keep on going right here. Let's see. So let's go ahead and go through 5 and 6. That'll be a good spot to go through. All right. So we have, let's see here. Then Sarai said to Abram, "This is all your fault. I put my servant into your arms, but now that she's pregnant, she treats me with contempt. The Lord will show who's wrong, you or me." Abram replied, "Look, she is your servant, so deal with her as you see fit." Then Sarai treated Hagar so harshly that she finally ran away. Oof. Okay, so far in the story, Abram and Sarai have kind of been the heroes. Abram literally a war hero at one point in time. These are the people that God is going to build a nation that is going to be his people, and through that bless all the people of all the earth. And right now, they're not really looking like the good guys. In this chapter, they're very much kind of the bad guys of the story right now. So Sarai immediately blames Abram, and Abram wants nothing to do with it. So he just says, listen, she's your servant. You just do whatever you want, like punish her or whatever. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, it's not my problem. It's your problem, and you have the authority to fix it. So yeah, and Sarai takes that, and she takes out all her emotional baggage on Hagar, and to the point so harshly that Hagar ends up running away. So it's actually a really sad situation for Hagar. I mean, she's done pretty much everything she's been told to do up to this point. You know, maybe she could have had better character and, you know, and grace and humility when she did get pregnant, but that's, you know, the treatment of her right now is not her fault. And so, you know, being chased out like that, I almost said she ran away, but notice this as well. So Sarai and her were probably very, very close. Well, that relationship is destroyed. And, you know, Abram's response to all this was one of, you know, apathy. I mean, he didn't seem to really be concerned with Hagar or what happened to Hagar. So she's very much alone and unloved in this situation, where she's now pregnant with Abram's child, and huge mess. So, yeah. Now that this is all basically fallen apart right there, let's see what happens next, because it's actually a really cool story on talking about the character of God. So God is slowly revealing his character throughout this story right here. And really, when we get to the New Testament, we see a full display of God's character and the full revelation of God's character through Jesus Christ. And but we see a lot of it building up through these stories in the Old Testament. It's one of the great things about them. And so let's see what happens next. We're going to go through 7 and through 9. So we'll go ahead and jump right into it. All right, so let's go ahead. Let's see here. We're gonna make sure I picked up here it is. All right, so we have this. Verse 7, the angel of the Lord found Hagar beside a spring of water in the wilderness, along the road of Shur. The angel said to her, Hagar, Sarai's servant, where have you come from and where are you going? I'm running away from my mistress, Sarai, she replied. The angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress and submit to her authority. Okay. So there's more to this conversation between her and the angel of the Lord. And at first, and this is the first time the angel of the Lord is brought up in the story. And the angel of the Lord is going to be brought up a lot, actually. I got a few listed here. We can talk about it. He would later appear to Abraham, Moses, Balaam, Israel collectively, to Gideon, Samson's parents, David, Elijah. He comes up a lot later on in the story, and this is the first time that he is referred to. So the angel of the Lord, as you can see in the beginning of this conversation, sounds very much like maybe he's just an important angel, right? And then pay attention to what happens after this and how the angel Lord starts to talk, because he doesn't talk like an angel anymore. He starts talking like he is God himself and has all the authority of God himself. So basically the best that people can understand about what this character is that it is God, but it is not God the Father, right? It's not God in his fullness of being. It is a part of God. Would be called the Son of God. And so we've had maybe one instance earlier on in this story so far with God walking and talking with Adam and Eve in the garden. And you could say, well, perhaps that was a son of God as well. But here we have like the most blatant reference of the angel of the Lord. And keep this in mind. Who did the angel of the Lord appear to first? He appeared to Hagar, someone who is a woman who's been mistreated, unloved, and has been completely humiliated and broken down, and he's showing up to her, right? And so that's for people out there, I hear this sometimes. People who don't know the story will say things like, "Oh, the Bible is sexist towards women," or this, that, and the other. And it's like, no, it's not at all. You got to read the story. Here we have the angel Lord appears to a broken woman first. which is pretty powerful and pretty amazing. So let's go ahead, and there are some parallels with that with Jesus' ministry, but we don't need to go too far into that right now. Let's go ahead and talk about this conversation a little bit. So he appears to her, she's running away, and he tells her to return to her mistress. And that's basically because he has a plan for her. And the implication here is he's going to be taking care of her. So let's go ahead. I think that's pretty much what I have right there. So let's go ahead and get into the rest of this conversation because, like I said, pay attention to how the angel Lord speaks and you'll get what I'm saying. Let's see here. We have a few chats real quick. If Abram was supposed to be the leader of the family, it sounds like it was his fault. Oh yeah, 100%. Both times God talked to Abram directly, just like Adam. There we go. How I love the angel of the Lord. Heck yeah. Anyone seen God the Father? The Bible says that no one has seen God the Father, right? Which is why this is God, but it's not God the Father, right? Which goes into that later revelation of who God is, and that's this triunion being. We usually call it the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. All are God, equally God, but not God. Each of them separately are not God in their entirety, right? So it's a singular being with three separate consciousnesses or personalities. There's no partiality in Christ. Praise the Lord. Heck yeah. All right, let's go ahead and get into the rest of this conversation. All right. So we've got... here we go. Verse 10. Then he added, I will give you more descendants than you can count. And the angel Lord also said, you are now pregnant and will give birth to a son. You are to name him Ishmael, which means God hears. For the Lord has heard your cry of distress. We're going to go to verse 12. This son of yours will be a wild man, untamed as a wild donkey. He will raise his fist against everyone, and everyone will be against him. Yes, he will live in open hostility against all his relatives. All right. Well, here he is. He doesn't just tell her to go home. He also gives her hope and a purpose, which right now, before this conversation, she had no hope and she had no purpose other than to die in the wilderness. In the most vulnerable state that a woman could be in. And so, here is the angel of the Lord now declaring you will have many descendants and speaking with authority into her life in a way that only God could. So that's where we get the idea that, well, this is not just an angel. And every time the angel Lord appears, it's the same thing. We'll kind of talk like an angel and then talks like God. So, and then, he's giving her a purpose and a future, like, hey, you are going to have many descendants and you're going to have a son. This is what you're going to name. This is what his life is going to be like. It's not the prettiest of situations, but nonetheless, he's going to be important and she's going to be important because of that. So literally showing up and rescuing her out of her dilemma and instructing her to go back home. So, and let's get her response here. The conversation isn't done yet because this is the best part of the story right here. All right, we're just going to read through the rest of this chapter. Therefore, Hagar used another name to refer to the Lord. Thereafter, Hagar used another name to refer to the Lord who had spoken to her. She said, you are the God who sees me. She also said, have I truly seen the one who sees me? So that well was named Ber Lahai Roy, which means well of the living one who sees me. It can still be found between Kadesh and Bered. So Hagar gave Abram a son, and Abram named him Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Ishmael was born. All right, he's no spring chicken, right? So she says that you are the God who sees me, the one who sees me. And so this is a revelation of God's character that, keep this in mind. She's an Egyptian servant, an Egyptian slave, right? She is the lowest in the low on the social structure of humanity. And she's not part of this, this people that God is creating, right? She's just a servant from a foreign land. And yet God still, came to her in her distress. God still heard her and still loved her. And so, and this is a common theme throughout the Bible. It's not in the Old Testament, God is just concerned about the Israelites, and then later he's just concerned about Christians. He's concerned about everyone. One of the things that Jesus was tempted by in his ministry by Satan was to look out over all the nations, and then Satan promised all those to him. And that was temptation because Jesus wanted all nations to come to him, because he loves all the people of all these nations. And so we see someone who's calling out to God, and God responds. And, God wants to give, first off, God loves everybody, and that's the message here. And he has a plan and purpose for everyone's life. All he requires is just for people to turn to him and turn away from themselves and the worship of themselves and worldly things, and just cry out to him. And he promises that he will show that love and give that purpose, right? And we see that happening here in this moment. So, he is the creator of all things, and he is the God of all people, not just the God of Abram and the Israelites. So, so we've got, a very beautiful scene right here where Abram and Sarai have really messed up a situation to the point where God literally physically has to show up and intercede and rescue this poor woman who was mistreated. And we'll get to see her story continue alongside Abram and Sarai here. There's definitely going to be more going on with that. So, but that's pretty much a story at this point. That's the end of chapter 16. We will be going into Abram actually getting his name from God, Abraham, in the next one, which will be pretty interesting in and of itself. So with that, I think I kind of covered all my notes there. So on our way back to Earth, what we'll cover is talking about a common question that's brought up, and this idea that, we see, in chapter 16 of Genesis, God as being a loving God, and we can see that. But didn't we just talk about earlier where God wiped out the world in a flood? And so how do we deal with God's loving nature and his wrathful nature? Are these two things that are conflicting in the Bible, or are they not problematic at all? So we'll talk about that on our way back. So, and if you have any questions, reach out in the chat or in the comments below if you're watching after the live show, and we will, I'll respond to it and we'll have a conversation about it. So anyways, with that, let's go ahead and go back to the front of the ship. Okay. See here. I think. Yeah, here we go. There it is. All right. So we are going to be heading back now. So let's talk about this a little bit. So one of the things that people will sometimes bring up, and I hear this in conversation, is that, God's wrath or God in the Old Testament is different than God in the New Testament. Or God's wrath doesn't make any sense. He's willing to wipe out all these people on the earth, yet he's over here caring for Hagar. And the reason for that, let me go ahead and make sure we get locked in here on Earth itself, so we don't want to fall into the atmosphere here. And there we go. All right, so that should keep us where we need to be. Okay, so the big difference with that, so God's wrath against it's actually against evil. It's not against people, right? And not directly. It's only against people indirectly. So basically, God's love for good, God's love for innocence is why he hates evil, right? It's why he hates darkness. And that darkness and that evil, as we saw with the pre-flood situation, without any intervention, will just spread, and eventually the whole world, as it was that point, there was not a single good thing in people's hearts or minds. Like, they weren't even thinking a single good thought. It was all completely evil. And so in that situation, anyone born in that situation, raised in that situation, if they hold on to their innocence or try to worship God, they're only going to be destroyed in that kind of environment. and oppressed in that environment. And of course, or they'll just be condemned because they'll just adopt those evil cultures and they'll never really stand a chance. So God has to wipe out those situations, that darkness, in order to save humanity from it. And so, yeah, we saw that with the flood. We're going to see that with other situations in this story that we're talking about. But God primarily hates evil because he loves good and he loves people and wants to bring people to him. And the things that separate people from him, that is what he is against, right? So there really isn't actually, anything problematic with that, because that makes sense for, any parent with their child, right? Like, they hate the things that are trying to threaten or hurt their child. And if it's a, person behind that thing who's trying, doing something evil, then of course they would act to stop that person and protect their kid, right? And so this is basically the same thing that God is doing. And God promises not to let the world get to a point where he'll have to flood it again. And that's what the rainbow is all about. It's a sign that God is intervening now, and he is going to make sure that he fixes the problem of sin. And this is actually a story, the Bible is really the story of God bringing people back to him and solving the problem that sin introduced. So with that, I think we're pretty good. Let me see, make sure I catch up on chats here. No partiality, I think we covered that already. All right, so with that, I guess I'll go ahead and let you guys go. Appreciate you guys stopping by for the Silverwind. Be sure to, share this. One of the big things that we're doing here is obviously talking about stories. Wednesday night, it's all Bible stories, and we're going to go through it in chronological order in order to, best understand it. It's important to understand these things. This story has changed the face of the entire world, through Western civilization and everything like that. The world has never been the same since, this story and, of course, Jesus Christ. And it's important to understand it. And on top of that, it also, we're trying to engage people's critical thinking here. It's okay if you don't agree with everything I say, but we'd love to have a conversation with you guys as we go with these stories, and then also challenge your guys's maybe, default perspective on things about the universe, what science says about these things, and to kind of show that, science may assert something really, well, not science. Science isn't the problem. Scientists who have a materialistic perspective and do not think critically beyond that materialist worldview, they'll say things very boldly and say, Io, of course, is 4.5 billion years. But as we just saw, that creates a lot of problems that they're not quick at all to admit to you. And, we should be critically thinking about all things. Otherwise, we do really silly things when we don't, right? Whether we talk about Abram not critically thinking about that situation to even take his wife's feelings into factor. He was just so focused on, didn't mean to hit the mic. So focused on, just having descendants. Clearly, he didn't even love Hagar. He didn't have feelings for it. That's not why he jumped to the plan that Sarai proposed. It was only because he really wanted descendants. That was it. Clearly he didn't care about her because he let Sarai abuse her and then chase her out, right? So, and then of course that also speaks to the fact that these aren't perfect people that God chose. He didn't pick Abram and Sarai because they were just these, of their own, accord, super righteous people. God attributed righteousness to them simply on the basis of faith, not because they were actually sinless and blameless. Definitely not sinless and blameless. So God can use anyone, which is pretty cool. Let's see here. Thank you. Silverwind is awesome. Heck yeah. God bless to you too. With that, we're going to go ahead and party on our little outro right here. And I look forward to next time. I'll catch you guys later.
I know the air I'm breathing, it's no good for my lungs. I do this every season, I hate when summer comes. I fall into a trap that I made by myself. Oh, and I always do the wrong thing. I'm unstable and I'm unsteady, I've lost a million times already. And I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down. I feel unable and so unworthy. My heart feels heavy, I've lost already. And I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. And I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. And I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. I'm always self-destructive. I take a hit, I love it. Can you give me a second? I'm slow, got blurry vision. I fall into a trap that I made by myself. Oh, and I always do the wrong thing. I'm unstable and I'm unsteady. I've lost a million times already. I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down. I feel unable and so unworthy. My heart feels heavy, I've lost already. And I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. Please help me see the things that I am. I don't understand. I'm doing the best that I can right now, but it's never enough. I'm not